Hawk. Today I have the privilege of having Grant Veeder on the show, who is our county auditor here in Waterloo, Black Hawk County. Welcome for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Janine.
Yeah, this is fun. I'd love to meet all these Democrats that are powerful in our community.
Whatever you say.
Okay. Well, first, what I like to do on the show is start with your journey into where you're at now. So when you were young, were your parents Democrats, or what was their involvement? You're raised on a farm?
Okay, well, I was born in Belmont, Iowa. We moved to Boone, Iowa when I was about a year old, so I grew up in Boone and graduated high school there. My father was a barber. That was a surprise that I was saving for you. And my mother was a homemaker who eventually took on other jobs as the children grew. And she eventually became the city assessor in Boone, Iowa.
Oh, wow.
So a couple of things about the significance of those facts. My father, as a barber, was a union man. He was very involved with his local union. Mm-hmm. And my mother, her involvement in serving the public and city government had a strong effect on me as well. So when you talk about my background as a Democrat, I think it's important to say that when we were young, I have an older sister and a younger brother. Our parents wouldn't tell us what political party they were. They said,
"Interesting.
You need to make up your own mind. You need to understand what these politicians are saying, and whether you believe them or not, or mm-hmm. who you support, and so on. Don't let us sway you. Make up your own minds."
That's awesome.
And as time went by, it became more and more apparent that they were Democrats, especially my mother. She used to always tell us about how she was very proud that she voted twice for Adlai Stevenson against Dwight Eisenhower in '52 and '56. So as time went by, it was very clear that they were Democrats, and I grew up pretty Democratic myself, just because it was important in our family to be aware of and be supportive of people that were less fortunate. And
oh, absolutely. Now, in high school, were you involved in anything, or in college, or
I didn't get involved in high school with with the Democratic Party at all. When I was in college, I remember I was in college during the 1972 presidential election, which was George McGovern against the incumbent Richard Nixon. And I went to the campus headquarters. I volunteered to help. But basically, they just needed people to help take people to the polls, and so they needed people with cars, and I didn't have a car, so I sat around the headquarters all day pretty much doing nothing. But it wasn't too long after that because of a couple of friends of mine that were involved with the county party, I got involved in the Black Hawk County Democrats.
That's neat. So how did you get to where you are now? I mean, what was the journey there? You went to college and...
Yes, I went to the University of Northern Iowa, and so I pretty much lived in this area ever since. Lived for about a year in the Quad Cities area. But I was in college to get a teaching degree, which never really worked out. I had a major in English and a minor in history, and then I went back to grad school after a couple of years out of college and got a master's degree in history. History is a huge love of mine. It's a big part of my life. I'm still very involved in reading and writing history.
Oh, that's neat. What actually are you doing with it?
Well, right now, and actually most of the involvement that I've had over the last several years has been with the study of Abraham Lincoln. great Democratic president. No, actually, he was a Republican, but that was back when the Republicans were the good guys, unlike now.
Right.
Anyway, when I was studying history in college, I was mostly interested in American history, a lot of it Civil War history, and so I got to know more and more about Abraham Lincoln and became just my role model in history, a man of the people who believed in the people and believed in civil rights. And so I got involved enough with studying Lincoln that at the time of the bicentennial, back in, well, the bicentennial of his birth was in 2009, but the celebration ran from 2008 through 2010. And so there was a Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission nationwide, and a number of states had state-level commissions that the legislatures enacted. And so Iowa had one of those, and they put together a commission, and I was fortunate enough to get a spot on that commission.
Oh, neat.
And so one of the things that we did a lot of work on was, let's put together and celebrate Abraham Lincoln's connections to the state of Iowa. And so we found out a lot of stuff that I didn't know anything about. And at that time, I put together some presentations, and I went around numerous places around the state for that period of time, that couple of years, giving a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that showed connections that Lincoln had to the state of Iowa.
What were those? I'm interested.
Okay.
I mean, I'd love to hear about that.
Well, for one thing, Lincoln visited Iowa that we know for sure of like 3 times. Mm-hmm. And these were visits of varying significance, but they're all interesting. Then he owned land in Iowa in 3 different places. One of them's not very far from here, just down in Tama County. Mm-hmm. And another plot in Crawford County, and then some land in Council Bluffs. And interesting stories about all of those. And then he knew a number of people from Iowa that he got involved with politically, and he appointed some Iowans to very important positions, like Samuel Miller he appointed to the Supreme Court, and James Harlan he appointed as Secretary of the Interior, and some others.
Boy, that's interesting.
Yes, and James Harlan's daughter, Mary, married Abraham and Mary Lincoln's son, Robert. And so they spent some time living in Mount Pleasant, which is where the Harlans were from. Mm-hmm. So there's a big connection to the Lincolns down there. And, you know, the Lincoln family line died out fairly quickly, but there was always an Iowa connection there as well, which is very interesting.
I see, I never knew that.
Well, I'll give you some stuff to read about it, because I ended up started to writing some articles about it. Now, I'm also very involved in the Iowa State Association of Counties through my role as county auditor, and there's a magazine called the Iowa County that ISAC puts out monthly. Mm-hmm. And back then they let me write up some articles about those Iowa connections, which we published in that magazine, and then they were actually collected and published in the Iowa Heritage Illustrated magazine back about 10, 12 years ago. So those articles are available. Then I continued to write about other aspects of Lincoln's life and career in Lincoln. Yeah. That were also published in that Iowa County magazine. And
that's awesome. You know what? You should do a show here, and you could actually do a series here about Lincoln and The
You know
articles
what?
you wrote, that would be really cool.
Sign me up.
Good, you'll have to talk to them here. I think that's a great idea. I'd watch it. I think that's awesome. So what I wanted to ask you is why you were hired by Black Hawk County.
Okay.
How did that progress?
All right. I was in graduate school in the University of Northern Iowa from 77 to 79. And it was during that time that I met some friends who were involved with the Black Hawk County Democrats. And so I got involved with the local party, like I said before. And the county auditor at that time was Isabel Frericks. And she had an opening, this is in 1981, she had a job vacancy in the position of Deputy Commissioner of Elections. And basically because I knew some people who knew her, I got an interview for the job, and so I got hired with the county in 1981, running the elections.
Wow.
And so that is a big part of what the auditor's office does. It's not the only thing, but I spent 6 years doing that, and then after a retirement of another deputy in the office, I spent a year or so working on real estate and property taxes, and helped familiarize myself with another part of the office. And this was at a point where Isabel, she knew she wasn't going to run again, and she gave me a leg up there, letting me get familiar with another part of the office. And so then when she didn't run in 1988, I did, and I won, and I'm still here.
So how many years have you been doing this?
Well, let's see.
I can't figure that out spontaneously.
34 years approximately as county auditor, and about 41 years working for the county.
That is awesome, Grant.
I hardly feel that old, but if you check, I really do.
Yeah, old is only in the mind, right?
Right.
You got to keep moving it. So so you were talking about some changes coming up in your life. What might that be?
Changes coming up in my life? Did I say that?
Well, much longer are you going to be there?
Oh, okay. Well, my current term runs out in 2024, so I will need to make a decision then whether I'm going to run again.
Okay. Well, you're doing a great job. I don't know why you'd leave now, unless you just want to travel and have some fun.
Well, I'm not a spring chicken anymore.
All right. Well, that's good. So I want to ask about mentors in your job. Who really affected you in your life besides Lincoln?
Well, at the county, there were a couple of people who made a big impression on me and helped me a lot. And the first one was a guy named Don Trinnell. He had the Deputy Commissioner of Election office before I did. And I was very fortunate to get hired for this job without having any background in it at all. I tell people that if you have degrees in English and history, you can do anything, and I'm living proof, but I needed a lot of help. And so this guy, he went to another job in the courthouse. He just changed positions with the county, but I needed to go to him every day to ask him how things worked, and he was just very patient with me and helpful, and just helped me a lot to learn my job, and learned it well enough so that I became a resource for other people around the state.
That's neat. Who was that?
That was Don Trinnell was his
Trinnell.
name. Yes. And the other person that sticks out in my mind quite a bit is an assistant county attorney named Pete Burke, who just passed away a couple of years ago. He started working there before I did and just left working for the county just a couple of years ago when he was ill. And so he was in his 80s. You couldn't guess how old he was. Had this very positive, youthful attitude all the time. And he was always a gentle person, a friendly person, good-humored, and his particular job with the county was to advise the Board of Supervisors and other county elected officials as a member of the county attorney's office. So he was involved with a lot of controversial, turbulent things that I witnessed over the years that you're always going to see in government.
Oh yeah, it's always there.
And he was the person who was there to advise the board. And supervisors sometimes are a little more aggressive, and if you have somebody who suing the county or something, you say, well, we're not going to let them get away with that. They're just trying to do this or that. And sometimes a calmer head has to advise them, and he was always the calmest.
Kind of about mediate.
He was, not necessarily mediate, because
Yeah.
he is just advising the board, not,
I see.
not necessarily, he would get sometimes involved in the litigation, but just advising the board. And I'm not just talking about lawsuits and so on, just how they worked with the public. And he'd be at all the board meetings, and so would I. So we sat next to each other for 30 years at board meetings. And it's just a great role model, because he didn't let things excite him or upset him. He was just very professional, always gave the board good advice, always gave me good advice. And I just thought, and it's kind of in the way that I appreciate Abraham Lincoln. He was self-confident in himself enough that he knew that he didn't have to react with negatively, or wouldn't let people get his goat.
I have a saying about that. I say that when I go to get emotional, I'll say, I release my reaction to understanding.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because once you understand it, what's going on, you don't have to react to it.
Yeah.
But we're at the end of the show, so I'm going to do another show with Grant, because I didn't ask him about his family or anything either. So we'll do another show, and thank you for being on the show, Grant. This was,
it was my
this
pleasure.
was very
Thank
interesting.
you for asking me.
I love the fact that you're into Abraham Lincoln. He's intrigued me. Have you seen the movies they have out about him?
Oh, I've seen a lot of movies about him, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've read a lot.
I heard he meditated,
books.
right? He meditated.
Oh, no, he didn't meditate.
Yes, he did. That's what I read. I read a book on. Anyway, we'll discuss this later. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Unity must be our plan.
Unity must be our stand.
Rebirthing new thoughts, questioning our wants.
Spreading our wings, freedom will sing. Oh yes, we are in this together, molding the earth with our hands.
We are in this together. Unity must be our plan.
Unity must be our stand. May love pierce your heart.
God's truth be your strength.